It's been a few months since you've started working on your dream indie game, and it's been going quite well. You've worked out your rough idea, you've made some snazzy art for it, you've got maybe some models and you've got some main mechanics in Unity, but it doesn't feel like you've truly made progress looking back. And sometimes you may just be wondering, is what I'm doing the right thing? In this video, I want to go over maybe some things you can do when you're in a bit of a slump to really reset how hard you're working in your game, because you still remember vividly back when you first started, you were working so hard on your game, you were probably coding 8 to 12 hours a day, you were telling everyone about it. But then, after working very hard on your game for a few weeks or months, however, you notice that you start to slow down, or maybe the work you're doing isn't really as good anymore. You first get hit with some refactors, for example, of things you need to change that you originally implemented incorrectly, and you lose a bit of your motivation. This is very normal to get into a slump like this. However, it's important that we tackle this head on and do some things about it so we can really continue working on our game. So in this video, I want to go over how you can get out of a slump when working on your own indie game. Here at Bite Me, we've been working on our own game, Forge Industry, for more than a year at this point, and it hasn't always been smooth sailing. We've also personally had to deal with maybe some members of the team who were not feeling as motivated, for example, or who felt like there wasn't really as much progress. And of course, it's very important that we can guide them a bit and get them back on track so we can continue working on our game, so we can release, for which you should go down in the description and wishlist us on Steam right now, so once we release, you'll be notified of that. In this video, I want to go over some of the tactics you can use to really, if you're stuck in a slump yourself, to really try out and see if maybe you can really get back to working on your game again, because we also just want you to be able to finish your game and make it a reality. The first thing I would suggest for you, and that you'll probably also find this applies online, is to just take a small break. You've probably been crunching 8 to 12 hours a day maybe on your game, and sometimes your brain just can't handle all of that work. It's important, however, that when you do take a break, don't take it for too long, because you'll lose the momentum of working on your game and you'll maybe forget certain ideas you had or certain implementations. So that once you go back and, for example, if you're a programmer, you really need to just get reacquainted with your code base. And you're probably also already on a day-to-day basis are sometimes wondering who the hell wrote your code yesterday, let alone 2 weeks ago. In general, I would just suggest for going for a break of maybe 2 or 3 days, but truly just disconnect from everything that is digital almost, and just really focus on yourself maybe a bit, have some self-care, but don't worry about your game for that time. Don't start looking at YouTube tutorials on how to implement certain things, and just focus on something else. Maybe go for walks, go out with friends, anything really to just take your mind off the game. Especially if you're a small indie developer who's just doing this in his spare time and also still has another job, this is really important to just not overwork yourself, because yeah, you can take breaks from indie development at least, but you also still need to be fresh for your main job, because generally we don't want to get fired from those, because we do like money here. If you are working also on another job and maybe you're struggling a bit with combining the two, and maybe you're not working as efficient as you think you can always check out our other video we've made about combining game development and a full-time job on the side. There should be a card for that one up there. Now, you've returned from your small break and you do feel quite refreshed, but it seems as if, it's still not going great. What do you do then? What I would suggest then is for you to start experimenting a bit. Maybe you're generally an evening person working from 8 p.m. till midnight. Try switching it up for a few weeks, where you work from maybe 5 or 6 a.m. for a few hours. Really good book that I can recommend you there as well is called Deep Work, where it really goes about working a few very focused hours without distraction, so that you can really perform optimally in a quiet time and then just chill out the rest of the day, and you'll generally perform better even than when you're doing work all over the day without really setting down some time to work on it. Some other things you can experiment with, for example, is start a YouTube channel or live stream your programming or other development shenanigans on Twitch, for example. This way, one, you're making it maybe a bit more fun and engaging, because you're not just working on your game alone anymore if you have an audience. And you also have some kind of accountability to do something by the end of the day, so you can show your viewers that, hey, I am actually working on my game. Another important thing is to stay organized. Do you know how far you've progressed on your game, or do you have more of the ad hoc, oh, I'm just gonna work on my game, and you work on your game every day without really having a big structure of what exactly are you working on. Are you working on certain mechanics, or are you just running around doing music one day and then coding the next day and then the next day making models? As an indie developer, you'll have to do all of these things, but you don't have to do them at the same time. You can focus first with, for example, getting the main mechanics done with programmer art, then later on looking at models, and then finally looking at music, for example, and really just spending weeks on end on only one of the three instead of mixing around one day of each. This is basically project management. We've already made a bunch of videos on it on this channel, so I'll just go over it quickly again. What you need to do is have some sort of issue tracking. So for example, something like a Kanban board in Trello or Notion is a big one, or we at Bite Me Games, we use GitLab as it's also where we store our games, so it's all neatly concentrated. Apart from being organized in your planning, also look at your workspace. It really has a big impact on how am I working if you're either having a big mess all over the place, and not just physically, but also digitally. When you're, for example, looking for assets, do you have some kind of structure? Or do you lose a lot of time in looking at, okay, in which folder did I put this again? Because, you know, Windows is always slow in finding files. So it's much easier to just have a structure of, I know where I can find this, and I don't have to lose a lot of time finding certain resources. Or maybe it's 2D art that you want to use for reference, or maybe it's some models, maybe it's some sound. Maybe it's some previous code projects that you've made where you want to look and get some inspiration from. Structuring your digital life is also very important. And then this last one may be a bit controversial, but sometimes you just need to know when you quit. So maybe you've been working your game for 9 months already, and for the past 6 months you haven't really been feeling motivated at all. At this point, you may need to really look at, okay, do I really want to continue this? Of course, a big problem a lot of game developers have is, of course, the shiny object. The moment that you start working on your game and you get a new game idea, you just want to go to that next one, but you should also focus really on finishing what you start. But sometimes you just can't. And you can see maybe if you can push out something half decent, but even then, maybe if you have no energy, that's a really hard one. And this is also where, for example, something like the sunken cost fallacy comes in, where, okay, yeah, you may have already spent 2 years on a game, and it would suck to throw those 2 years away, but you haven't wasted those 2 years. You've still learned a lot of things, which doesn't mean that you've wasted really those last 2 years. So you can see, okay, what's this new game idea I have? But you should use your failed project, because that's what it'll be in the end. We have to be honest there. Use that to learn from and what went wrong. Did I have a scope that was too big? Was it a technology I didn't understand? And make sure that whatever project you're going to be working on, plan with those things in mind. Really drastically reduce the scope or change the way your technology is working, use a different engine, something like that, to make sure that this doesn't keep happening. You can fail once, but generally you don't want to fail too many times, because then you're just wasting time, and it's also just going to make it harder and harder to work on your games in the future. Before you start with that new project though, it's really important to just have gone through that entire development process and make sure that your game is published somewhere. Maybe it isn't finished enough to put on Steam and charge money for it, but still you want to put it maybe on something like itch.io, have a little vertical slice or something, just that you can point back in time and be like, hey, this is still something I worked on, and that you can actually show to the world instead of just having it on a hard drive and then one day that hard drive fails and you've lost all your progress on that game. You still want to have something that 10 years down the line you can still look back to with a bit of feeling happiness. You should see this as a bit of a diary for your development process as a developer, and you can always just look back at it in the future. So I hope that some of these things have helped you out of a slump. Are you still stuck? Maybe you need some more help, you want to have some questions? Feel free to leave them in the comments down below. We're not planning on quitting our game just yet, so if you're interested into a resource management and automation game made by us, be sure to check the link in the description down below, where you can wishlist our upcoming game Forge Industry right now. Apart from that, if you're new here, hi, we're the development team behind Forge Industry, and we're making this content on a weekly basis where we're going through the things that we've learned as developers and also just documenting our journey as becoming our own indie studio. If that's something that's interesting to you, be sure to subscribe down below, because it's a win-win for both of us. That's all I have for this week, and thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!